He's been about a year in office, and we reflect on the year we've had. 2013 has been a difficult and challenging year, and as we all remember, we went through an energy crisis which actually started in 2012 and continued till almost August of 2013. As a result of the disruption of the West African gas pipeline, it reduced our ability to generate sufficient power to meet the rising demand of Ghana's growing economy. Aside from that, we were battling with an economic deficit and rising inflation. As if that were not enough, we've had industrial unrest arising out of implementation of the single spine pay policy. And then also mysteriously, we had a series of market fires which destroyed the properties of many of our citizens, especially our women, and affected their livelihood in a very negative manner. To top it all, we had a dispute over elections of 2012, and so the Supreme Court for many long months had to sit to adjudicate this case. And so this combination of factors made 2013 quite a difficult year. But in our political training and upbringing, we learned to focus and to be able to face such challenges and bring the nation through without letting it have the kind of adverse impact as it would have. One, our focus has been to bring down the deficit, and then two, to also reduce inflation, and consequently to bring down interest rates to make the cost of borrowing cheaper for business. We set a target of 9%. That was quite ambitious, but we have been able to achieve 10.2%. We expect to bring the budget deficit down to about 8.5%, and we're hoping that we can bring inflation down end of year to about 8%, definitely back into single digits. We've introduced policies like the National Stabilization Levy. We also introduced a new import levy. In the budget of 2014, we're introducing a 2.5% increase in value-added tax. One, to increase the revenue base, but also to bring us at par with all our neighbors. Most West African countries are implementing a value-added tax of 17.5%. Ghana continued to be one of those implementing value-added tax at 15%. So all these measures are meant to correct the economic fundamentals and make the economy provide the kind of environment in which businesses can grow. But certainly one of the major challenges that faces us as a nation is how to restructure the nature of our economy. Our economy has been dependent on the export of a few raw materials or primary products, principally cocoa, and then also gold. And there used to be timber, but as a result of the depletion of our forests, timber has reduced in importance in terms of exports. But we still have manganese, which we export in the raw form. We have bauxite, which we export in the raw form. We have diamonds, industrial diamonds, which we export in the raw form. And of course, we have the host of non-traditional exports, most of which we export in the raw form. And I believe that the time has come for us to change the structure of our economy and make it less dependent on only a small segment of commodities, but also be dependent on the export of goods and services, and also an increase in the strength of our manufacturing industry. And so in the next State of the Nation address and the medium-term development plan that we're going to present to Parliament this year, we're going to outline the steps that we intend to take to be able to achieve this. One of the critical constraints to African economies is the availability of energy or power. With economies that are growing at an average of 7% and over, demand for energy is rising at a fast pace. And so African nations ability to transit into middle income status is going to be dependent on how much energy they are able to generate to power industry and other good services that they have in their countries. Ghana has a comparative advantage to produce energy. One, because of our hydroelectric potential, but two, more importantly, because of the current thermal potential that we have as a result of the discovery of oil and gas. Now, we're working on the Ghana gas plants to produce gas to feed our thermal power plants. Aside from that, we're receiving gas from Nigeria through the West African pipeline. The two gas pipelines in combination would give us a better, position to not only produce more energy for ourselves, but probably in the future to become a net exporter of energy. But the doomsaw that occurred starting from 2012, when we had a disruption in the West African gas pipeline, created a shortfall of about 300 megawatts of power. And so we had to ration power, to both residential and industrial consumers. And it created quite a difficulty for Ghana's economy. In the first half of the year, until about July, Ghana's economy grew at a slow rate of about 6.7%. In the second part of the year, provisional outturn in terms of growth was between 7.4 and 7.5% because we had more energy coming into the system. What we had to do was to fast track some projects that we had been working on. And so as a result of that, we're able to bring power from T3 into the network, almost 180 megawatts. And then we also fast-tracked the Bui Hydro Dam. It has 3 turbines, and they had virtually finished work on 1 turbine. And so we strategically decided that if 1 turbine was up and operational, we should start to run it and feed its power into the national network. And so we did that, and that brought another 133 megawatts into the network. We also encouraged the Senate plants to commence production, and they also fed additional power into the network. And so with that, we're able to cover the gap of 300 megawatts. But I must say that we are putting in more generation using what we call independent power producers, because government on its own cannot leverage the kind of financing to meet the demand for energy that our people are demanding. And so what we have to do is to get the private sector to invest in the energy sector to be able to add to our energy generation. And so we have private sector operators registering as independent power producers and being given licenses to produce energy and feed it into the grid. But of course, when you have the private sector coming in, the private sector does not come in to produce energy for charity. They sell it for a profit. And so it means that we must adjust tariffs to the stage where it is attractive for them to come into the sector and produce power so that we can feed not only our energy demand, but probably in future become a net exporter of power. So the vision currently is to hit 5,000 megawatts by 2016, and we're on track to do so. This year alone, we have 534 megawatts coming into the grid. And if you add that to what we have already, it means that our total installed capacity should come to about 2,800 megawatts. And with the various thermal projects that we have lined up, and with the coming of gas through the Ghana gas processing plant, we are hopeful that between now and 2016, we should be able to cover the remaining 2,200 thereabout megawatts to hit 5,000 megawatts. That will be far above what Ghana is currently consuming. Ghana's average consumption currently is anywhere at peak periods between 2,300 and 2,500 megawatts. And so if we hit 5,000 megawatts, then it means we should be able to evacuate that power to neighboring countries in order to earn foreign exchange for it. In the last election, education and health were a very critical issue for the voters. And all parties that participated in the election espoused, plans for education and health. In education, the major problem is access, quality, and then affordability. And so these are 3 areas that government has been working on. During the campaign, we promised that if we won, we were going to do something about access and quality. And so we promised that we're going to build new community day secondary schools. Work is far advanced. The designs have been done. We're just about to start to go through the procurement process. We've selected the sites and the communities and all that. And as soon as the Ministry of Education has gone through the procurement process, work will start on the community day secondary schools. We have the first 50 lined up for sod cutting, and I'm sure that early in the year, indeed I had intended that we should cut the sod before the end of the year, but you have to go through the procurement process and it takes a little while. And so once that is finished, I'm sure early in the year we'll cut the sod and work will start on the first 50 of them. Aside from that, we also, in terms of affordability, promised that we will rationalize fees in order that fees are more affordable for parents. And in doing that, we realized that different schools charge different fees. I mean, there were kitchen fees, there were bed user fees, there were teacher motivation levy, there were, just name it, all kinds of fees. And every school decides on a fee and starts charging it. And so we called all the headmasters together, the Ministry of Education, and then discussed the fees and rationalized them. And if you notice, over the end of last year, we've been publishing the accepted fees that should be charged in secondary schools. Indeed, it was funny. The examination fee is 50 cedis. Government subsidizes it by paying 35 cedis, and the students are supposed to pay only 15 cedis. There are examples in schools where headmasters, despite the subsidy, were still charging students 80 cedis, even more than WAEC charges, after government had absorbed 35 cedis. And so we've strictly warned the headmasters that anybody who charges outside the approved fees will be called to book. And a few headmasters have been sanctioned already. So I think that is working, and it's something that parents have welcomed very much. The Ministry of Education has been consulting with stakeholders to look at the roadmap, towards free secondary school education, as we are enjoined by the Constitution to do progressively. And so early in the year, I'm sure that she will come up with some roadmap. Aside from that, we've been working on quality, and several initiatives have been taken to improve especially the teaching of science and mathematics and also English. We have procured 13 million textbooks for the 4 core subjects, and we have distributed them to children to achieve the ratio of 1 child per textbook. And that has gone very well to be able to improve, the quality of the children's work. We're doing other work with the teachers in order to ensure that teachers are not absent from school, to make sure that we strengthen the inspectorate system so that teachers have to go to school. There's a lot of teacher absenteeism, and so that we're working on too. So I think that with all the factors, access, quality, affordability, we've done some work this year to be able to improve the education sector in this country. With healthcare, we have major problems. 1, with access to quality healthcare. 2, inadequate health personnel. And so we have built additional nurses and midwives training institutes to produce more nurses for our health facilities. Aside from that, we have additional medical schools in Cape Coast, which are working well and producing doctors. I went to the oath swearing of the first batch of doctors in University of Cape Coast. We're gearing up the University of Allied and Health Sciences in the Volta region to also start the training of doctors. We also have private universities that have come in and offered to provide training, medical school training in Ghana, and that they're going through the process. And I'm sure that soon the number of doctors that we produce, would probably be sufficient to meet our need. One of the major problems is getting health personnel to serve in the rural areas. And so we'll work on incentives to make sure that we're able to get them to move to the rural areas. A major issue for health delivery we've been working on is the issue of maternal mortality. And as a result of that, we're rolling out what we call CHIPS compounds, community health compounds. And these community health compounds are manned by nurses or medical assistants so that they are able to monitor pregnant women and make sure that they move them to a health facility if they're going to have a difficult birth in order that we don't lose them. That has made our maternal mortality rate climb down slowly. It's not going down as fast as we want, but it is coming down. And that is why during the election we pledged that we're going to build 1,600 more new CHIPS compounds in order that there's more access for our people to healthcare. The CHIP compound don't handle only pregnancy, they also handle all cases of malaria, dysentery, and all the basic tropical diseases. And so we believe that with more access to these facilities, it will make the quality of healthcare of our people much better than before. With regards to governance and democracy, Ghana continues to be the model for Africa. Our respect for human rights and the rule of law is, unparalleled on the continent. And our respect for media freedoms, I think, is also very commendable. Recently, there's been a lot of concern about the issue of corruption. And as we are aware, corruption is an issue that successive governments have had to deal with. I believe that the first step in tackling corruption is to expose it. And people have a greater sense of perception of corruption because we are investigating the cases and exposing what has happened. Other governments will prefer to cover up. But I believe that if there are any reported cases of corruption, we must investigate it and indicate what has happened. It is important to deal with corruption by preventing it, and then if it does happen, to sanction it. And so in our fight against corruption, we're not only dealing with sanctioning people who have been engaged in corruption, but I think that more importantly, tightening the administrative system to prevent people from being able to take advantage and be corrupt is the most important. And so that's why in the recent measures we introduced some administrative measures that will make it more difficult for people to be corrupt. For instance, I'll give you an example. One of our major problems has been sole sourcing. Sole sourcing occurs where there's a project and you make the bid for the project available to only one company. And so because you don't have competition between companies, you often won't get value for money. And there is a possibility that some consideration would have gone into the decision to do sole sourcing. And so we're going to amend the procurement laws. We're looking at a review of the procurement laws. And I think that in reviewing the procurement laws, we'll look at the section on sole sourcing. But in the meantime, I gave an administrative directive that ministries, departments, and agencies that want to apply to the Public Procurement Authority for sole sourcing should bring the issue to Cabinet first and justify before Cabinet why they are deciding to sole source instead of opening it up to a competitive tender. So I think that is one of the issues that will introduce a bit more transparency. There have been complaints about land acquisitions. I've said that all land acquisitions should be published so that everybody can see who is acquiring which land. I have also asked that all contracts that exceed an amount of 5 million Ghana cedis that recur in successive budgets must be published so that everybody knows what contract it is and it makes it more transparent. Often these decisions are taken at the level of the ministries, departments, and agencies, and it is only when a scandal breaks that the presidency becomes aware of it, because the presidency is aware of the issues that come to Cabinet. If there are administrative issues at the MDA level, often you won't get to know what is happening there until something happens. So we're getting on top of the fight against corruption. We've investigated several of the cases. People have are being charged, dockets are being prepared, and there will be some prosecutions. One of our major challenges is improving the prosecutorial system and also the judicial system to make sure that these cases don't end up in court interminably. Often when that happens, the citizens feel that nothing is being done about cases of corruption. We're also working with the Auditor General so that when the Auditor General's report comes out, we'll take the cases that are of a criminal nature in that report, and then we will have those cases prosecuted. And I have said that ministers and chief directors' performance appraisal is going to depend on an ARIC, we call it ARIC, Auditor General's Report Implementation Committee. Ministers and chief directors' performance appraisal is going to be dependent on an ARIC report that they give us, showing what they have done to implement the report of the Auditor General in their ministries, departments, and agencies. So I think that we're getting on top of the issue of corruption. I am committed to the fight against it, and any report that is given to me about corrupt activity will let the appropriate government agency investigate it and take any appropriate measures that are necessary. I was very pleased about 3 weeks ago to cut the sword for the beginning of the expansion of the Takoradi port. It will allow Takoradi to accept in shipping volumes almost 3 times higher than they have done in the past. As you know, because of the growth of West African economies, our ports are in competition with each other to handle not only our own traffic, but also to handle the traffic of the landlocked countries in the interior. And so Takoradi and Tema, as they are, have been congested for a long time. And so with this new expansion in the ports, we would have more ships coming in and being able to turn around quicker than they have done in the past. We will be cutting the sword for the expansion of Tema Port too very soon, and I believe that that will be helpful. We're looking to, this year, I'm looking forward to cutting the sword for the beginning of the rehabilitation of the railways in Ghana. You know that the railways have been moribund and defunct for so many years. We currently are going through some procurement processes, and if we finish that, we'll break ground for the rehabilitation of the Western Railway line and then eventually the Eastern Railway line. And then we're looking at a continuation to the northern part of our country. So that is going well. Aviation, we're going to refurbish the Kotoka International Airport and make it more functional. Traffic volumes have grown phenomenally over the last 5 years, and so we need to expand that airport to be able to accept the volumes and keep Ghana as the preferred hub for aviation in Africa. But not only international traffic, also domestic. We're going to refurbish the Kumasi Airport, Sunyani Airport, and then we're going to cut a sword for the expansion and upgrading of the Tamale Airport. And as I promised, the 4 regions that currently don't have air aviation services, we're going to build new aerodromes so that domestic commercial flights can fly into those regions. And so all in all, the urban transport network is going to be improved, the road infrastructure. The ability of a country to develop and move in terms of economic prosperity is how you are able to make your people move goods and services freely across the country. And that means the road network too has to be worked upon. And so we're going to invest more than $1 billion over the next 3 years in the road network in Ghana. And I'm sure that people will see visible improvement in the network. I believe that 2014 is going to be the tipping point where Ghana sees more opportunities open up to the country to consolidate the prosperity and progress of our people. My vision is to see a country in which our opportunities are open to everybody, notwithstanding your political affiliation or your ethnic origin, where all Ghanaians can look forward to a dignified and prosperous life, you know, in any part of the country in which you are. We want to create different growth poles for the economy across the country, instead of having a concentration of the bulk of business and industry only in the Greater Accra region. We are looking to create a new hub for industrialization in the Western region based on the oil and gas industry. And so there's going to be a new inland oil services terminal where the oil industry can do their fabrications and all that. We've passed a local content bill to give opportunities for Ghanaian business in the oil sector. We're looking to the Mid-Belt, Kumasi, and adjoining areas to create a new growth pole there for processing of cocoa beans and other industrial activity. We're also looking to the northern parts between Tamale, Buipe, and all that area to enhance the agro-processing potential of the northern part of this country, because it has a good percentage of the arable lands for agriculture in this country. We're looking to the Volta region to the east to boost the salt industry. The salt industry alone, can produce nearly 2 million tons of salt, which can energize, industry in that area. The Volta region also has a lot of tourist potential. It has industrial potential. We look at the central region. It's got potential for knowledge sharing because of the academic institutions there. We can make it the ICT hub for Ghana so that knowledge sharing and the ICT industry, can blossom there. So the opportunities are vast. And the medium-term development plan that we're going to give to Parliament in 2014 will outline our vision for all this, and I'm sure that we can get the support of all Ghanaians behind us. And so, after 1 year in leadership, I wish to assure Ghanaians that we remain focused and that I believe that we can make our nation great and strong if we all stand together. One of our major drawbacks has been the very deep partisan divide that we have in this country. I believe that despite the competition for political power, we can work together in a way that makes our country able to progress. And I call on all Ghanaians, to come on board and let's make our country what our founding fathers and mothers intended it to be, the Black Star of Africa.